yes, there's going to be a tremendous amount of attention given to the physical traits of the individual. There's going to be attention given to of course, the IQ traits, because we want that kid to go to Stanford. We want that kid to go to Yale. But what AI will never get, and why your work is so important, are the spiritual values, which again are the lead sled dog, which are the drivers of our future, if we allow them to be. And that's a big if right now. There's more dictators on the planet today than there were 10 years ago. And we're witnessing the devastation that is created from the planet standpoint, from the social standpoint, from a personal standpoint, by that quality of authoritarian secularism on the planet right now. So the work on compassion, this is all hands on deck, all oars in the water. This is the moment. And we have to take this seriously. It's not, as the Dalai Lama said, a luxury. It is a necessity, and it's right here and right now. So thank you both for what you're doing.
Hello, my name is Clay Boykin, and I am in search of the new compassionate male. I believe in the midst of these incredible times of change, a new compassionate male is emerging as the new archetype. And this podcast is intended to give voice to both men and women on the overarching topic of compassion consciousness in men.
Hello world, it's me, Dennis, and we are in search of the new compassionate male. I get to produce this episode, and we're here with the founder, Clay Boykin. Hello, Clay.
Hi, Dennis. Boy, have we got a show this afternoon.
Amen.
We have our dear friend back now for the third time, Gard Jameson. Gard, can you believe it's been a year?
No, it's been a very long year.
That's one of the things that we want to talk about, Gard, because we were talking about historically, like this has been a historic year. And we were talking right before the program started about history, and you grew up in a showbiz family. Your stepmother was Eva Gabor, right?
Yes.
Who was one of the Gabor sisters. Green Acres, had a wonderful movie career in this, and you got an opportunity to be around the star system at that time, and where compassion may or may not have entered into this. And you were talking about some of the personalities that you had and how Ava was truly as she was on TV. Could you talk a little more about that?
Yeah, Martin Buber suggests that there are two ways to approach another person, either as a transaction or as a real person. And I think compassion begins when we approach each and every person as a real person with intrinsic value. And, growing up in that environment, there were a lot of different personalities that I met along the way, but Ava was one of those individuals who really exuded a quality of sincerity and genuineness and care for the other person. She really saw each and every person as a genuine child of God. She came from a Catholic tradition from Hungary, and her father was a general. She said we used to hide under the table because he was really a general. And they escaped from Budapest during the communist occupation. And she came with very little with her sisters, Magda and Jaja, and her mother, Jolie, and they really made a life for themselves. And I will say it was a deep blessing for me as a teenager to be influenced by her compassion. I think it was one of the many influences that moved me in the direction of committing my life to compassion.
As an actor, I don't know if you can play an emotion that is beyond something that you can experience and make it real. So that when somebody like a Jimmy Stewart, which those of us who have this, when he has that decency, I don't believe, unless it's part of him, he could not make me believe it. But when you have that, or a Peck, that's there, or that Ava showed so beautifully.
Yeah, Heraclitus, the great pre-Socratic philosopher, said, character is destiny. And I share that with all my students at the university, that if I don't teach you anything else, character is destiny. So well the seeds of character. And Ava did that. And it was interesting, again, when you observe family dynamics, to observe the differences between her and her sisters.
Mm-hmm.
She was genuinely a compassionate person, and her co-star in Green Acres, Eddie Albert, was the same. I remember pulling up one night. I was dating his daughter, and it was on Sunset Boulevard. And lo and behold, guess what was coming all the way out to Sunset Boulevard? Corn stalks. It was a real thing. So I had to go through the corn stalks to get to the front door.
Oh, how wonderful.
He was a genuine person, and he like Ava, really exuded a quality of sincerity and a desire for something better. Eddie was a student of the Urantia book, which I am. And in the book, he found a lot of sage wisdom that helped him along his journey. And his was a long and very illustrious journey, as was Ava's.
Clay and I were talking beforehand about what we wanted to discuss with you about what you learned about yourself during this past year, what you learned about the world, what you learned about your students, what some of the ways that that compassion has impacted, influenced, need to influence more into what is going on and what is going on from your perspective. So we were hoping to get a catch up with you on so pick any piece of that. And
well, like you, Dennis, and like you, Clay, when COVID first hit, I doubled down on compassion. I recognized in the polarized world we're living in, from the standpoint of politics and economics and social behaviors, that we're living in such a world of fear. And I think John says it best, perfect love casts out all fear. And so allied with perfect love comes the intention to demonstrate love in the world. And that's where compassion comes in. And so right out of the gate, it was early April. I think we got the alarm calls in March. But early April, I signed up for something called Delivering with Dignity, which was to deliver meals to the most at-risk people in our community who were shut in because of cancer or because of poverty or because of a number of things. And, I, as we said at the outset, right, 90210 brat, I grew up with privilege. And so taking responsibility for that privilege was a very important lesson for me in the last year. And it's not to say I haven't done it in the past, but I doubled down on it during the period of COVID. And I continue to double down on it. So we're just amplifying our activities here locally around compassion. When the George Floyd murder took place last year, I scratched my head, as so many of us did, and said, what could we do to begin to change culture? Because culture, right, compassionate culture is really the only thing that's going to move us forward. And so I remember having a talk at lunch with our Attorney General, Aaron Ford, about the fact that we had three elements of the criminal justice system. We had the police force, get them. We had the district attorney and the judicial system, throw them in jail. And we had a little bit of rehabilitative material activity here in the community. Hope for Prisoners, run by John Ponder. Anybody wants to check it out, it's a fabulous program endorsed by the police department, the DA's office, judicial. But there's a fourth element. Either of you want to guess what the fourth element is? You learn this in Criminal Justice 101.
Well, what my question would be, like, when there is ever a gun, an incident with a gun, What I'm most interested in is not what happens after, but what was happening 1 second before, what was happening a week before, what was happening a month before, those are the questions that I feel like that we should be thinking about.
Yeah, and Dennis, you are, as we say in the game, you are very warm. Number 4 that you learn in criminal justice, the 4th plank of criminal justice is restorative justice.
Restorative.
And
Restorative justice.
Restorative justice is just the expression of compassion in the judicial system. And if you look around, I don't know how it is in Texas, but I'm going to guess you don't have it formally in the system. You probably have judges who will say, well, this one we're going to let off because, I see some circumstances. But you don't have a formal restorative justice program. And so I began what I call whispering conversations when I'm thinking about moving to action from, that attitude of compassion. And I found that there was a deep appetite for adding that 4th plank. And so I have a wonderful fellow who started restorative justice in Baltimore, Philadelphia, and DC. I have an Obama fellow, Seema Gujwani, who is part of the restorative justice program in DC. She's the one who originally inspired me to get on to this. And we're getting onto it. And it's really, really kind of exciting. And our focus is juveniles. Because as you said, Dennis, what was going on 3 seconds before that gun went off? What was going on in the home a week, a month, a year before that gun went off? And when you begin to put those elements together, when both the victim and the perpetrator begin to see, if you will, the larger picture, then there becomes room for compassion and restorative justice. And so we had a wonderful fellow. I took a class with Tarek Masserini, who is the fellow who started these programs up in the East Coast. We had a wonderful fellow, and his name was Rodolfo Rivera. Rodolfo, 24 years old. Rodolfo, a former Marine. Rodolfo grew up in Chicago. Rodolfo grew up in a family in which there was a tremendous amount of alcohol. Rodolfo married his sweetheart. Rodolfo went to a party one night, woke up to find his wife dead. He had blacked out. He had gone into some kind of a state. And he was in jail on first-degree murder. The folks on the restorative justice side got to Rodolfo not before the original court case, but after. And as Rodolfo shared with us, students at Georgetown and myself, a few of us were let in so we could hear these stories. He said, I wouldn't be alive today. He said, I attempted suicide 4 times. I wouldn't be alive today if there wasn't a restorative justice program engaged. And he said, today, as I sit here talking to you, I have restored relations with my mother-in-law and with my wife's family and my young son, who was born just a few months before my wife's death. I am so looking forward to my parole. I'm doing everything in my power to be a good prisoner and to show that I really do care. And I have stopped, obviously, because he's in prison, all my addictive behaviors. So again, my big question, right, as we move forward into this 21st century, which has such great uncertainty, is what are the programs that we're laying, what is the track we're laying down right now for compassion to be operational within our systems? And I think a big one is restorative justice. So wherever you are out there in Radio Land, whatever state you're living in, I encourage you to reach out to your DA, to your Attorney General, to these people and find out what's going on. Yeah, how have you formally institutionalized restorative justice in our state? That's what I'm interested in.
Yeah.
So again, the COVID period was a huge period of transition. I also, interestingly, decided that I should write a book. So I wrote a children's book.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the story of a father and a daughter And it's the discovery of the daughter of what love really is. And as she goes through the journey with the father, and they go up these stairwell to heaven, and they sit there on the clouds talking about what love is, she gets a little sad because she discovers that in order to have love, got to give it away.
Yes.
And I think that's the big secret.
Gard, talking with Charlie Barker,
Yeah.
and the charter, he said something one day that I'd never thought of, and it was, we've got to start teaching compassion when they're babies. Yeah. And to do that, we've got to teach the parents. But that's the seed. That's where it begins there. And I had gone back as far as, well, we got to teach our young folks. But he really hit the nail on the head, and that's what I see in this book.
Yeah, well, that's what's got to go on. And again, I call it the 3 S's: synchronicity, serendipity, and synergy, right?
Yeah.
When you open your heart and mind to what's real, those 3 S's begin to kick in. And one of the people I've met in the last year who has changed my life is a lady named Scarlett Lewis. Mm-hmm. Scarlett Lewis lives in Newton, Connecticut. Anybody know what Newton, Connecticut is famous for?
Yes, yes. Sadly, there was a terrific murder there.
A mass shooting, and her son Jesse stood in front of Adam Lanza with his rifle, and we think saved the lives of all of his classmates because he took the bullet. And so, dear Scarlett Lewis and her team have started another program, which is called Choosing Love. And it's to your point, Clay. Choosing Love is a program which is free. You can bring it into any institution. It's basically just cultivating that culture of love and compassion, and getting teachers at pre-K and K and 1, 2, 3, all the way up to begin to think on these things. I believe in Philippians, say, think on these things, right?
Yeah.
We do, then our minds begin to change. And so she is instituting programs across the United States in school systems and other places called Choosing Love. So I encourage your radio audience to go look at Choosing Love. She's an inspiration. She is going to come and speak to our Compassionate Mayor's Breakfast in November, the Thursday before Thanksgiving, and she's an inspiration.
I wanted to ask you, I hear the term radical empathy used a lot. And at first blush, I say, yeah, that's good. But it's a step along the way to compassion. Radical empathy is the head game, I think, trying to describe what is in the heart.
Well, we like to say in the compassionate integrity training, there's cognitive empathy and there's emotional empathy. And not till it gets into the heart is it real. And the two of you know, right? The heart is really the prime driver.
It is.
Way too much attention to the head.
Haven't we studied in neuroscience that the heart actually has, that there's an intelligence that we have, just like in the gut, there are intelligences that are part of, we think we have given too much power to that, thinking that it's only the head.
Yeah. Stop me if I've told you this story. So 8-year-old girl gets 9-year-old girl's heart. 9-year-old girl had been murdered. 8-year-old girl starts to have nightmares. 8-year-old girl goes to mom. Mom takes the 8-year-old to the psychologist. The psychologist takes the girl to the forensic CSI artist. A picture is drawn. It's a relative of the 9-year-old. 8-year-old girl is able to lead detectives to where the weapon is. 8-year-old girl's memory with 9-year-old girl's heart leads to conviction of the relative of the 9-year-old. This is documented by Dr. Paul Pearsall in a book called Heart's Code, which is to your point, Dennis, the heart, right? Jesus says, He doesn't say with all your mind, heart. He says with all your heart, mind, body, and soul.
Order of operations.
Yeah, it's the sled dog. It's the lead. So again, we are just beginning to scratch the surface. And what's really important right now, I'm doing a lot of reading in genetics right now, because what's really interesting is what's happening in genetic engineering. And before we pass from this planet, I'm sure you're going to see, and it's already the case in China, genetically engineered babies, right?
Certainly.
And so again, as we engage in, and I'm a believer in it. I have prostate cancer now. And if I, as an embryo, could have been discerned having that gene that was moving in that direction, I would have loved to have had that gene edited. So anyway, it's a brave new world, as Aldous Huxley says, and we're moving into it very rapidly, where we're going to be able to determine traits, not just physical, but behavioral traits. And the only thing that AI doesn't have on you, Dennis, or you, Clay, is spirituality.
I've been reading about AI for years, and I read this one book about the people that were working on the emotional intelligence part of AI, that in order to get to be able to see how that works, and it ended up being women. That it was women researchers, but the minute that they would bring it up, they get slapped down. No, we're not. You don't stay out of it. But gradually, it's getting into that if we can bring the EQ into artificial intelligence, understanding what that is, bringing what that is, what might that look like, feel like, what might that be?
Well, you all know the story of Lance Armstrong. And so in the competitive field, you just take sports as an example. What countries are going to do, what China's going to do, is already doing, right? Is going to create the Ubermensch, the Superman,
sure,
in the Olympics, right? Which is coming up in Tokyo. And so again, yes, there's going to be a tremendous amount of attention given to the physical traits of the individual. There's going to be attention given to of course, the IQ traits, because we want that kid to go to Stanford. We want that kid to go to Yale. But what AI will never get, and why your work is so important, are the spiritual values, which again are the lead sled dog, which are the drivers of our future, if we allow them to be. And that's a big if right now. There's more dictators on the planet today than there were 10 years ago. And we're witnessing the devastation that is created from the planet standpoint, from the social standpoint, from a personal standpoint, by that quality of authoritarian secularism on the planet right now. So the work on compassion, this is all hands on deck, all oars in the water. This is the moment. And we have to take this seriously. It's not, as the Dalai Lama said, a luxury. It is a necessity, and it's right here and right now. So thank you both for what you're doing.
Thank you because it's it's one of those things where you go, boy, wouldn't you like to have been there when the start of it? Well, we are here when. This is the when they're going to write about. Whatever is going to be happening is happening now.
Yes, yes. As we say, get your shift together. Right? This is a moment of shifting, right?
Yes. And that's what we're doing.
Hopefully not the other word.
Exactly. I think this gives us our opportunity. This gives us our opportunity to see that there is a power. There is this power, that love is an actual, and compassion is an actual power. It is very difficult for me to be deeply compassionate to you if I haven't done the inner work on myself. I was doing the best that I could by the light I could see by.
Yeah. Yeah, just the other day, I did something quite thoughtless involving my wife. And I had to giggle a little bit, and we laughed like we've never laughed last night. I said, what an opportunity to express compassion to your husband.
Go ahead, Clay. I want you to try that. I'll try it with Melissa, and let's see how that works.
I said, I'd actually like you to thank me now.
Wasn't that nice? I've given you a chance to practice compassion.
Yeah, I was reaching for my pen and paper to write that down. I'll use that this evening.
Yeah, well, sometimes we are a little thoughtless, but
Oh yeah,
it is a spiritual intention. In Judaism, they have a wonderful word, kavanah. Kavanah means intention. And so where are our intentions right now? And again, I'm using Jesus. I could use Rumi. I could use the Buddha. I could use any number of individuals. Their intention was on the deepest parts of who we are. And so you mentioned, right, there's a narcissistic element to each of us, a selfish gene, if you will.
absolutely.
Our biological heritage, which we got over 540 million years ago.
Yep.
And that's not going away anytime soon. But what we can do, as you said, Dennis, is do the inner work where we can begin to transform the fear into love. And I was reading a wonderful book by Diana Butler Bass, and it's called Freeing Jesus. And it's incredible because she talks about how Christianity has been co-opted by fear, by the end times, by a God who requires blood on a cross, right? And if you don't pay attention, and Baylor did the study, right? 73% of all Christians think that God is distant, authoritative, and critical, right? Who wants to be in touch with a reality like that? But what I know in my heart of hearts is that God is none of the above. God is unconditional love. God is always transmitting love and compassion. The question is, do I have my antenna up? And that's the inner work.
God, when I was growing up as a child in Christian Science, there was a phrase, there's not a spot where God is not. And that we just said that in Sunday school. That was just a
Yes, and there's a God-sized hole in each of us that only God can fill. But what's the image of God that you're bringing into that hole?
Thank you.
That holiness, right?
Exactly. Is it, and that's where I love the idea of God as principle.
My language that I grew up with is God is love, God is this, God is this, God is this. The point was made is love is God. It's a minor change, but us trying to put God in a box, not that at all.
Exactly.
Representation of God.
That's what I love about Feynman, Richard Feynman, who said that God is too large for the stage. There is just no way. There's just no way you can put that around. Clay, I want to ask you about something, and Gard, because Clay has been teaching me a lot. He's been studying some of the alchemical principles in this. And is there an alchemical process to transmuting this anger into love, into I mean, is there a process like it? Because when you said that, Gard, it sounded very much like you were doing something in alchemy, that you were actually taking this substance and getting the go. So could you guys help me to understand that more? Because I'm at the very edges of it, and Clay is teaching me a lot, but I'm a lot to learn here.
Well, I'm at the very edges of it too. I'm just beginning to scratch the surface. And I think the one term, the prima materia, the original material, is the shadow. And to be able to take that and do process on that, we talk about bringing shadow, shine light on it. But that's a step in the alchemical process.
Yeah.
Then the results of that work is the philosopher's stone. And with the philosopher's stone, that material, we turn lead into gold. That's the material there. And the whole alchemical process, as I'm beginning to understand it, runs parallel with our individuation process. And as we get closer and closer to it, we find out what our true nature is, what we are really here to do. And from that, we're able to do our greatest work, or what they say, the magnum opus.
So I went to Pacifica Graduate Institute. Jim Hillman was a teacher of mine, and we read a lot of Joseph Campbell and Carl Jung. And Jung was a big alchemist. The realization is that the lead is the gold.
Mm-hmm.
Fear is the love. Fear is just another form of energy.
Oh.
The issue is, how do you take that energy, as Joseph Campbell would say, at the base of the spine, the Kundalini, and move it to the heart chakra, right? That requires a contemplative practice. How do you move the energy of anxiety from, if you will, the groin area up into the throat? How do you move the energy of anger, which is in the solar plexus, up into that third eye, into that awareness of the universal being and connectedness of everything? It's the realization you cannot get to love unless you go through fear. So every hero's journey, you have to take the journey to the Mount of Doom. You have to go to where it's the darkest. As you said, Clay, the shadow is the gold. You just don't know it. As Thomas Keating would say, right? There's only one thing that separates you from God. That's the thought that you're separate from God.
And up until recently, as I started studying alchemy, the shadow was something to get rid of.
Right.
You know, get rid of your, get rid of it. And, but your point is the shadow is the gold.
Yeah, well, Dr. Freud taught us a lot about that. That which you will repress will come back to put a lot of dollars in my back pocket as a psychiatrist. Because we can talk forever about your repressions. So, yeah, you cannot get to the soul. You cannot get to the self unless you move through the shadow. And that is the secret of alchemy. That's the secret of every spiritual tradition. We just haven't paid attention to it. So again, what we've created are idolatrous images of deity that have kept us away, that have suggested that God is distant, God is critical. And Clay, you wrote a wonderful piece on the critic within. And what we learned, right, is that there's a good wolf and a bad wolf inside of us. If we pay attention to the good wolf, we can grow and we can move through that shadow material.
So many things are happening right now. So the world, this opportunity where we're seeing people attempt to hold on to power, but that's holding on to power is not. I mean, that's something that just slips through your fingers. It cannot be held on to. We know that from any of the great spiritual traditions. You talked about an organization called the Mayors of Compassion. Is that the name of it?
Compassionate Las Vegas sponsors the Compassionate Mayor's Breakfast.
Right.
The Thursday before Thanksgiving, we bring all of our mayors together, and we bring 400 students from across the valley. We bring business leaders, community leaders, and we have whispering conversations about compassion. We actually have a captain from our police department, Sasha Larkin, who's going to be our speaker. And she's just terrific. She really understands the need for compassion within policing. Because as we both know, there's a kind of warrior mentality. You know, you get out of the Navy SEALs and you go into the police department and you think, well, here we go again, right? Get out the guns and keep them shooting, right? But that's not what policing is.
Well, let me ask you about that. How is it that we have ended up with the idea that the most celebrated person within a police department would be the greatest de-escalator? That we would celebrate someone who could bring peace to situations, to challenging, and that would be the person we would elevate. That would be the behavior we would elevate and send through the entire department, because we are known for our ability to de-escalate.
Well, and Dennis, I don't think you said it this time, but Didn't you refer to it as not being police officers, but being
Peace officers. Yeah, peace officers. What we would at one time, I mean, when I was at Marshal Dillon, I mean, I know he's a marshal, but I'm a peace officer. That was the deal. That was they keep the peace.
He was a good one. I liked him. But yeah, the average lifespan of a police officer after they retire, do you know what it is?
Hmm.
2 years.
Why in the world?
You know why that is?
Hmm.
It goes back to neuroscience. Cortisol. Cortisol in their bloodstream is always peak. They're always on edge. There's always, so cardiac disease, strokes, all of these different diabetes, type 2, all of these different stress-related diseases, chronic diseases, happen because of the level of, so again, the inner work. How do we get police departments to take 20 minutes in the morning to meditate and to bring those cortisol levels down? That's the trick. And
But Gard, when we're paying out $25 million to families for unjustified homicides and of the people, and we're doing those things, that's money being spent.
Yeah, and that actually will appeal to the conservative politicians, if you will. I won't make any labels here, but it's a bipartisan issue. It's like the cost of a child who falls through the cracks. The system is going to pay, according to Duke University, $3 million for a child who falls through the cracks. But that's just the economic cost. But I can appeal to some of my conservative brothers based upon those numbers. But really, the real cost is the cost of the individual and their potential to be an incredible contributor to society. That's the real cost, and that goes without price tag.
I love that. I want to go back to the breakfast that you were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
And you said whispering conversations.
So the mayor of Las Vegas, Carolyn Goodman, who's just a delightful lady, her husband went through transformation. He used to represent the mob. The mob was here in Las Vegas. And he was a former mayor before her. But as she likes to put, Oscar, I got 13 years. You only got 12 years in the mayoral seat. But Oscar was the one who started it. He started a mayor's interfaith initiative within the city offices. And he started getting interfaith people together to have whispering conversations about how can we deal with the drugs on the street? How can we deal with homelessness? How can we deal with a number of these issues? And so we're doing it. In fact, I'm planning to come to Austin in September to see your first Community First initiative. It's a wonderful program, and we're looking to replicate it here. And again, we're just whispering, and we have, as you know, a ton of money coming down from the feds here shortly, and we've got to figure out what to do with that money. So that's what we do at the Compassion Breakfast, is we talk about, after the formal presentations, we have a town hall, and the kids, and they're lined up with questions. So we have superintendent of the school district, we have police, we have the mayors, and the kids are just lined up with questions of, why couldn't we do this? Why can't we do this? Why couldn't we have a hotline? If I have a brother who's thinking about suicide, why can't I have a hotline? And now we have it through the school district. We have the national hotline, but we have a local hotline. So again, this is how we move things into action.
I just love that term, whispering. It sets the stage.
Yeah.
It sets the stage.
Yeah.
It brings this whisper. We have to listen to each other.
Well, I have a brother, and he was the international president of YPO. You may be familiar with Young Presidents Organization.
Oh, yeah. That's a huge organization.
These are the movers and groovers. They run the big corporations, and they've got pretty powerful stances in the world. And I continually am having the conversation because he says, Gard, it's about hard love. You got to be tough. You got to push those kids. You got to move them out into the... I said, no. I take my cue from Lao Tzu, who's much older and much wiser than you. He said it's about water. And also I take it from Bruce Lee. It's about still water, right? Still water. That's the most powerful force. It actually gave rise to the Grand Canyon. Imagine that. So again, this continuing dialogue right now, which Dennis, you alluded to, from a narcissistic standpoint, tough love, hard love, which our former occupant in the White House attempted to exert, right?
I'm a capitalist. I believe that, but I believe capitalism can have a bottom line of many colors. It doesn't have to just be red and black. It can be green. It can be rainbow. There are a lot of different reasons why. But capitalism is in my bones. But I want to have a conversation, and then I hear someone like Jeff Bezos, but he comes out with a statement that says people are lazy. And I feel when I hear this statement from one of the wealthiest people on the planet, that people are lazy, I want to say to him, you're not digging deeply enough, because it is not my experience. It is my deepest experience that people are anything but lazy. You give them purpose. You give them something that they feel like that they're of value. They will outperform anything you could possibly imagine if you would do that.
Yeah, Viktor Frankl said it. He said, if I have a why, I can deal with almost any circumstance. And he did, as a survivor of the Holocaust camps. And so, again, it's so conscious capitalism, right? It's like everything. There's selfish capitalism and there's unselfish capitalism. So unselfish capitalism lives and dies according to the golden rule. And the golden rule says everybody's got to be a winner. So, Mr. Bezos, you've got to pay your people a living wage. You've got to give them health benefits. There's all of these capitalists, right, who are these really hard driver, YPO, right, tough love, right? This represents a personality typology. And part of my growing up was the Enneagram. And most of the people that run our corporations and run in politics, you can see it, they're 8s. They don't like vulnerability, but they love power. You walk into their office, you'll see pictures of all the powerful people that they've ever been associated with. In order to what? In order to tell you, watch out, dude, I'm powerful. So again, conscious capitalism says there is a golden rule, and the rule is not just a rule, it's actually a law of the universe. We said love is powerful. Well, love is actually the fabric. It's the very fabric of the universe. So if you move against love, you're moving against yourself. If you move against diversity, if you move against LGBTQ, right? I have a transgender daughter. If you move against that, you're moving against the universe. And whether the rock hits the jar or the jar hits the rock, it's bad for the jar, right? So don't do it. So again, I'm a capitalist,
yep,
but with the golden rule attached.
Exactly. Gard, in this last part, one of the things that I want to ask you, how do we, because we're really seeing a big movement in a lot of the conservative circles that align themselves with Christianity. And I want to say, how can we align the principles of Jesus? You say you're a Christian. How do we, besides the prosperity gospel, and I understand, I mean, I've done some, and I understand it, but there seems to be a disconnect here that I would like, that it seems natural that we could make a fit there.
Well, I teach Christianity at the university, and what I will tell you is at the beginning of the 20th century, there was a clear appreciation that God is love. There was a clear appreciation that we're all family, we're all connected in theological circles, right? And these are really smart people in Germany and England and France who had really studied the Gospels. But what then happens is World War I, World War II, a depression, genocide, Holocaust. And so what happens is you have a devolving theology within Christianity, which says somehow, in order to understand those events, that God is out there, God's not in here. And as soon as you do that, you flip the switch and you lose the very essence of Jesus' teaching, which is that we're all brothers and sisters. We are related by genetically, not very much, right? To the chimp, we're 99%. And to the banana that the chimp is eating, 60%, we're sharing the DNA. So we're connected to the whole earth. And once you get that, as Richard Rohr would say, once you see what the universal Christ really means, then serendipity, synergies, synchrony, it all happens. And it's wonderful. And what a journey, right? It's like growing corn crops all the way down to Sunset Boulevard. What a joy.
Oh, Gard, it is so lovely to spend time with you, because this is, you see, I'm a great believer, and Clay and I have talked with it about at length about field theory, that we are actually raising the consciousness of the human being, and we will never know when that tipping point happens or whenever, but it is absolutely vital that these conversations happen, because these conversations are impacting the entire world. And as other whispered conversations are having around, it's actually elevating the consciousness of the human being. And that's what I feel so clearly when I get around you, and you, Clay, my dear love. Every time that you and I have a conversation, that's what I continue to go, and where I continue to go to get the opportunity to be able to do this.
I love that picture behind you, Clay. Is that the Om symbol in the middle? And then
You're right. It is the Om symbol in the middle. And this is my personal mandala. And what I've learned, the axis, and I put it in the axis, is the relationship of fear is to love as darkness is to light. And within all of that, and of course, I reach out as far as I can reach, and that's what the circle on the outside is. You know, for me, that's the precession of the equinox. That's as far as I could reach to the cosmos. But that's what's represented there. And the point that you made about the golden rule, this line here is religious tradition between fear and light. Religious tradition, as you follow it down from darkness and love, you have the golden rule there and compassion played out here.
love it.
Yeah.
Love it. You created that?
Stunning. He created, and let me tell you something about Gard. I'll tell you something, Gard, about Clay. Clay is a multidisciplinary artist. He's an extraordinary sculptor. He is a painter. He is there is so much of what Clay does and has, as you will see. He sculpts with words, with his writing, as you know, and so the opportunity to be able to see what he has done. And there he has a wonderful video on his mandala and the different work that he's done. It's short, it's delightful, and it was something that
I'd like to see it.
That will do. Well, this hour has flown by, both of you. Thank you, dear Gard, for another one in a series of conversations. I promise you, as we continue, as I get an opportunity to continue on in search of the new compassionate male, that we will have you back as often as possible to be able to be our beautiful touchstone to see what you're doing. And Clay, thank you for bringing me along the journey, and all the audience that is there. We will put a link to the book, to the children's book in Love is the Key. We'll put a link to that right in the link that you can be able to share, and also a link to Clay's work. And thank you, and thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you all, and we will see you next time on In Search of the New Compassionate Male.